say a course at the end of this nice and warm day with lots of lovely cooling sunshine coming through the roof. It is possible that you can find places which are not in the sun. So what we're going to do today, as you know, is basically have a round table discussion, and what is going to happen is that I'm going to introduce the panel members, and then I'm going to ask a series of questions, the questions that actually appear in the programme, and I'm going to ask each panel member to answer very briefly. So I'm going to try and keep each person to about a maximum of 2 minutes per answer. And then at the end of that, I'll see if anybody wants to comment on anything anyone has said. And then we'll move to the next question and do that again. Okay? And we'll do that as much time we have over the next hour and a half. So, firstly, let me introduce my panel. So, on my immediate right, I've got Fionnuala O'Brien. You can see that training in Ireland. Then I have Jan Larkin from Turning Point in England. Then Wendy Schaap from Gelneck in the Netherlands. And then Pauline Stewart from Family Drug Support in New Zealand. And finally, Alessandra Bassi from what I'm not going to try and pronounce, in Italy. So welcome to the panel. Round of applause for them, please. So this is, I learned from Jill, got to get people to do movement. Just moving their hands is a good idea. Okay, so let's start with the very first question. Why were you interested in this method? So I'll start with this end first and we'll move around.
I came back to Ireland to work for a family support network charity, and it was the first time I really thought about family members of people with substance use disorders as being a cohort, and to have something that was so effective and so easy to learn and perfect if you commit to it, and it just worked. That was why I was most interested in it.
So I was working in the National Health Service Drug and Alcohol Service about 20 years ago, and became involved with some action research with people from Africa now in Africa about whether we could make our team of working with drug and alcohol users more family friendly. And through that, and through working with the researchers with Richard and Lorna Turkington, I became interested in the method whether we could use it clinically.
I was working at Jellinek, and I think we were most interested in something that could also be useful for people who are not living with their using family member, as is a thing that has to be in order to get craft. So we were trying to make something our own, which was helping either way. If the family member was in treatment or not. So we wanted a broader group of people to be helped.
There was many reasons why I was interested in the 5-step for family drug support in New Zealand. Firstly, it had to be culturally appropriate, which it is. It had to be able to be delivered individually or to couples. It had to be evidence-based, it had to be accessible so we could use the 5-step over the whole of New Zealand. It absolutely had to be, as you said, available to impact family members, whether the focal person was in treatment or had moved into recovery or for any reason at all, it had to be available to impact family members. We had to be able to deliver it in a variety of ways. We absolutely had to be able to train our own practitioners. I wanted support as a leader as well from the organisation, and it really enjoyed, we didn't pick up those reasons, but it really enjoyed the international collaboration. I think we've all been on Zooms together around the world, and I think that's really great too. Thank you.
Maurizio works in an public addiction service, and he asked me and to another friend who are in the third sector to think about something to support gamblers' family members. And this 5-step method was okay because it does not pathologize family members, that tries to help with their own resource. It's not judgmental. You don't need to be a therapist. You can offer it in various ways. And it's addressed to them regardless of what their gambling relatives do. The vast majority doesn't want to do anything, so it's important for us.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody want to come back on anything that anyone said? Or we'll move on in that case. Okay. The question after this is going to be about the difficulties or challenges, but I'll come on to that. This question, the second one, is about what have been the successes for you in implementing the 5-step method. So, we'll carry on the same order, I think.
The successes for us have been, we got it written into the National Drug Strategy as an intervention for family members. So what we've been able to do is hold the government accountable to that recommendation. We've got funding. The 5-step method was delivered, or the training was delivered through that charity which went into liquidation after COVID. And we were then thinking, we'll keep it going. We have to keep people getting this training. We need it more than ever. People are struggling to kind of manage the impact of addiction that increased over COVID. And we used their, their commitment to the national, or to the families with naming it in the National Drug Strategy to go back to them and say, you need to subsidise people to come on this training and keep it relevant and keep it going. So that has been one of the greatest successes that we've had in Ireland.
I think for us, having moved out of the National Health Service, where it was really quite difficult to persuade managers to actually focus on family members, working in the third sector has been a lot easier. However, in the organisation I'm working with, primarily focused on working with drug and alcohol users, and there's been a lot of difficulty. Some of the successes are now, over the last 12 years, we've managed to make sure that whenever we take on a new service, there are always family workers within the self-staffing structure. Not enough, but we have some. And that there is kind of, it's now part of the norm that we work with family members and that we offer family members various interventions, and the 5-step being the main one. So that's the main success, is in a large third sector drug and alcohol focused organisation, getting family member support on the agenda and keeping it on the agenda so that we have the capacity to be able to offer some support.
I absolutely really close to what you just said, Jen, because I think it really helps when you have good evidence-based interventions to keep the family members on the agenda as well. So I think that's the main success for us, as well as getting ourselves our own accreditors and trainers so we can train in our own country, in our own language, and make the whole course more accessible. Yeah.
I think for us in New Zealand, with the spread out nature of the population, one of the big successes has been that we've been able to provide via telehealth, 99% of our workers are via telehealth now, a program that's really meeting impacted family members' needs. So the fact that we could do it on telehealth is really important. The data has informed our program and has allowed us to improve the program as we've gone along for impacted family members. So not only is it accessible, but we've been able to provide support for people who are in areas, professions where they have moral protection that they actually have to look out for, so they will not generally step across the threshold of community service, but they are very happy to have service delivered into their own home. So the flexibility has been amazing, and just being able to do the training and implementation to a high standard, and can we get more space behind the program and bring real successes from us?
Our first success was with family members, because we got to know aspects of them that we had not understood until now, and we are still learning. We learned a lot of things about family members. With the five steps method, you learn all the time about the people, about you, about everything. And the thing in the step 4 with about the communication with the others of the family is great. And step 3 was really learn how to be able to do step 3 was the most difficult and the most important learning for us. It really changed our ways to work.
Okay, well, so far it's all sounding really positive, isn't it? However, it's not all really positive. And the next question, in fact, the next 2 or 3 questions really, but that's the next one to start off with. The one after that is about any difficulties in the accreditation process. But the next question is about what have been the difficulties or challenges in implementing this method in your organisation?
It's not necessarily the difficulty implementing it within our own organisation, but it was just getting people to believe that it worked, and that if you just apply it in its true form, it will have the results you don't expect it to have. So trust us and do it. So that's been almost one of the biggest challenges. Don't overcomplicate it, don't overthink it, do it as it is, and you will see what you don't have to have a bit of this and a bit of that and join it in all together. Just come in, trust what we're showing you is there, your competencies, and it will make your life a bit easier. And for practitioners, to have that and to think that actually working in a structured way or a semi-structured way can actually give you a lot of freedom to be present with your family member rather than trying to kind of constantly meet them where they are at, or to problem solve, or to fight fires, or to kind of deal with crises after crises. It can just be exhausting after a while. So that's been one of the biggest challenges, is just to get people to believe that we're not making it sound better than it is, we're just telling you it works.
I think for us the challenges have changed over time. Initially the challenges were in convincing practitioners and managers in drug and alcohol services that working with family members is part of our core business, so that's quite a big challenge. Having partway met that challenge, I think some of the other challenges come from the staffing structures in services. So even sometimes when we have a family worker, that family worker is also, for example, the safeguarding lead for the service, or working with people at risk. And where that happens, where you have those blended roles, it's very difficult to then find time to work with affected family members in their own right, because risk and safeguarding will always be prioritised. So we work quite hard to make sure that with family worker roles, they are specifically for working with affected family members. Another challenge I think has been with practitioners. There's a lot of enthusiasm with practitioners, but there's a lot of worry that it's a short intervention, and that you will be revealing trauma, difficulties, emotional difficulties that staff don't necessarily feel equipped to work with, or are given time to work with. So there's been a lot of emphasis on, and we have regular 5-step supervision for all practitioners. What's the objective of the 5-step approach? It isn't necessarily to be able to help somebody to process previous trauma, and it certainly isn't that. So I think working with practitioners to say, it's a brief intervention, it's a structured intervention, it works, but what's our objective here in terms of what we're hoping to achieve? I think that can help in terms of those challenges.
I think our main challenge was to let go of thinking that people need to change things in order to help their using relative. because that was what we have been doing for quite some time, to actually really believing that there is no right or wrong, which I think is one of the best things in five-step method. But it's hard to implement that in an organization which has been working with different views for so long. So I think that's one of our main challenges, as well as spreading it, making sure organizations make time, money, effort to implement it, because it's a bit difficult when you compare it to other interventions, but I think it's a bit better also. So that's still something we're working on. But, yeah.
I think for Family Drug Support Aotearoa New Zealand, the big challenge was the Start an Orphan organisation. So you firstly have to find a flagship program that's going to be working for impacted family members and convincing people that you can help impacted family members no matter where the focal person is actually in their journey. So starting an organisation and doing the training and balancing the number of staff available to work with impacted family members with the number of applications coming in from impacted family members who want to help. So that balancing it was quite tricky for a start. Now we have 30 trained practitioners, and so we now have many applications available via the website. The other thing that was really important to us and a challenge was not just setting up via Zoom so that everybody in New Zealand had a chance to do the program, but building the systems behind that so that it worked really well for impacted family members and for the practitioners.
For us it was difficult to find family members, especially outside the addiction service, where the family members are focused, like the other part, on the therapy. For us it's important and difficult to find those who can help family members when the gamblers doesn't want to quit gambling, doesn't want therapy. They are really under the iceberg. The other thing that we failed to get the topic of helping family members interesting. This is our problem. I don't have to tell it to you.
I'll just chuck in another difficulty, which has been my experience of training and working over many years. It's when practitioners don't like the idea of adopting a semi-structured program. That may have changed over the years, because the idea of there being structured programs, certainly in England, has come in more widely. And so many people working in the drug and alcohol service will be expecting to use some form of structured or semi-structured way of working. But when I first started out in this area, a lot of people took great pride in being non-directive and felt that it was really, really important to be non-directive. And although, as Pauline has remarked on at least 2 occasions over the conference, one of the key things about the 5-step method is that the practitioner is in charge of the process, but the client, the family member, is in charge of the content. That distinction is not one that a lot of people used to understand, and therefore there was resistance to the idea of it being a structured intervention as opposed to basically going with the flow. And that came up certainly in part of, in response to the next question, part of the accreditation issues, in that lots of people found it difficult to do what they were meant to do in each step because they wanted to be person-centered. So that's my 2 pennies worth. Anybody want to comment on anything that anyone's asked about the challenges before we move on?
And just to support what Dan was saying around reminding what we're doing, we're not here to fix everything, and you said it yesterday in your presentation, it's not a panacea, that's not what we're trying to do, we're not saying this is going to cure all of your problems, come in and we're going to, you'll be better now. It's around saying, once you have learned how to look after yourself, put your own mask on, you're then able to look after people around you, and it has that knock-on effect, and that's what we're trying to do. We're giving you skills so you can leave this service and not feel as if you close tomorrow that your world will fall apart. And it's really reminding people that we can only deal with one thing at a time. So let's just do this and then stick with us and see where we go from that. So I think that's really a big thing.
Okay. The accreditation system. Obviously the accreditation system, certainly we who developed the FISAC method, think and see as the gold standard. But what are the issues surrounding this? And I ask this knowing that we have a range of organisations here, from everybody who does this is accredited to not very many people who do this are accredited. So I think that's quite an interesting mix we've got here.
We're in a unique situation in Ireland because family support is an established service. It's people who work as family support practitioners in a family support service. So we're quite unique in that fact in saying if this is what we're going to treat people that are affected family members as service users, we need to deliver them quality interventions. So you can come and do a 2-day course and then go off and you don't know what you're doing. You're not going to learn how to drive, take a lesson, 2 lessons, and then you're just going to drive for the rest of your life. You have to learn that you're going to not understand it at the start. You're going to figure out what you don't know. By going through that accreditation process, you start to be aware of the nuances that are really important. And actually, what we found for people that have previous like craft or different interventions, they find themselves slipping back into it, and there's a lot of drift. So it's really important to remember when we prepare people, if you have another discipline, you're going to have to be so much more diligent when you're doing your accreditation to just be aware, am I slipping back into my comfort zone and going and doing kind of a little bit of this? So we've set up, much to everyone's delight, I'm sad, I'd imagine, in who's coming forward for training, but you can't say that you're a 5-step practitioner unless you're an accredited 5-step practitioner. And because of the size of the country and the way it's set up, we are in control of that element of it. So you can say that you're working in an informed way, but you're not delivering a 5-step method as an intervention. So we were lucky because we've been able to kind of set it up like that from the beginning, whereas if you're kind of trying to bring that in and it's already been established, I can imagine it's much harder.
Could you estimate what percentage of people who are working with family members and have been trained in the 5-step method, what percentage of those would you say are accredited?
Since 5-step came to Ireland, a very small percentage. So, and that's where, so it was, when it first came to Ireland, it was very heavily subsidised. And there's this weird thing about, this weird sense that almost if you haven't invested financially, then there's not really like a kind of commitment to going forward with it. So it costs like €50 to get your accreditation done, and everyone's like, it's only €50, I don't mind if I don't get it done. So it seems like we're kind of putting it back on people to say, you have to commit financially because then it's going to give you that incentive. So we have the subsidy to make it not a financial burden, but then your organisation is going to kind of support you because they know that they've used the subsidy. If we are repeatedly taking this subsidy and we're not putting people forward for accreditation, we're not going to be able to get the subsidy in the future. So you don't want to, you kind of have to use, unfortunately, money talks in Ireland especially, you have to kind of use that to get people to get on board. Because once you're accredited, you're accredited. And so it's not about saying like you're signing up to some sort of strange pyramid scheme where you have to pay in and pay in and pay in, you know? So it's around getting people to get in and say, you're worth the investment to yourself, your family members are worth this investment, so do it. So that's where we've kind of, and we have different levels of different types of support that we're putting out for people who did training a long time ago and haven't come forward for accreditation. The process is terrifying. So we're there to support them. So it's not like, you know, we'll give you like, you know, 5 sessions for €600. It's around saying, talk to us and we'll talk to you as much as you want and we'll support you through that accreditation process because we don't want you to be put off by it. We want you to prove that you can do this. And so that's.
I think for us there have been a number of challenges about accreditation. I think one is that when people come into family worker roles, they're not usually coming from a background of doing accreditation or being audio taped or, you know, having their practice observed, monitored, evaluated. They may come from, a lot of people come from a lived experience background, so that people who themselves have been affected and are affected family members are often really keen on the training and the supervision and, you know, really engaging, but there's quite a lot of fear about the accreditation process, as you were saying. I think the other thing is that the motivation for accreditation isn't particularly strong because the way that the services are configured in England is that people move around different organisations and commission, services get commissioned very frequently, so people are always moving around different organisations. And not all of the other organisations actually offer 5-step as an integral part of what they do. So from an individual perspective, you know, there may be the case of why would I go through that accreditation process to have this on my CV? How is it going to benefit me when I move into another organisation where they don't actually use the 5-step approach? So it's not so generalisable in a national context as some other kind of qualifications. And also I think another part is that we don't say to people that they have to be accredited. You know, we could do that. I think that would be quite difficult. I think it would reduce the amount of people that would do the training because of the fear aspect. So it's a really difficult balance to get the quality at the same time as getting people enthusiastic and involved and trained without thinking or being put off by an accreditation process that's really unfamiliar to them.
Well, I'm Dutch and I was accredited in English, and that took long and was really hard, and I was slipping into my old habits of doing the thing you just said. But I also really learned so much, so that's what we try to tell everybody, that it's really super helpful for yourself, for the affected family members you are speaking with, to do the accreditation and to really commit to learning the 5-step method as it's supposed to be, because it's different and it's really helping you if you take the time, the effort to commit to it. And we try to make it easier in Holland, first because it's our own language, we can do it ourselves, but we also make sure they have one person that guides the whole accreditation process, and we do make sure someone else is also doing one of the sessions at least, so you have different people judging you or giving you the feedback you need. But we try to make it as accessible as possible by making it personal, providing little moments of feedback or help when people get stuck or things like that, because we really truly believe that if you want to do the 5-step method right, you need the accreditation process and you are going to grow so much. So we really try to help people get through, and up till now we have about 50% of people that are trained that are also accredited, so we're doing quite well on that, yeah.
I understand that the accreditation process is, or the accreditation is the gold standard. I do have to say that I'm really passionate about helping impacted family members in the best way possible. So halfway is really a challenge for me. I think when you train people in the 5-step method, it looks really simple, and it is, but it's also really complex. And when you do the training and people, any training, and people go away from the training and decide what they heard from the training and what they're now going to do with that training, you get a huge dilution effect, and you aren't actually getting the 5-step done in the way the 5-step evidence would show. So I think there's some things around that that are really important. I think the selection of trainees who come in to do the 5-step, for us at Family Drug Support in New Zealand, there's an absolute expectation that they will do the accreditation immediately after they've done the training. And they all say at the end of that accreditation, I know it's difficult for many services, we're a unique service in a way because we only work with impacted family members. But the practitioners say, I learned so much during the accreditation process, and we continue that after the accreditation, so they get a lot of supervision. So the other thing that I'd say around that is that it's important to train assessors and trainers so that you've got enough assessors and trainers to do the accreditation, because it's a lot of work for a service to do the accreditation, even if it's all in English. And you know, if you're doing it in Dutch and you're doing it in Italian, I mean, I just think that's amazing. But I think it's really critical to have. In our service, we only allow accredited practitioners to work with impacted family members, other than when we're doing the accreditation.
Our starting problem seemed to be language. Actually, it was more the cultural setting. we would have needed the cultural mediator. We were saved by two things: your patience and kindness and of Jill's, and that we had basic counseling skills. But the accreditation process is terrifying, but incredibly educational. You live in a panic for weeks, but you learn things you won't forget. They are kind of burnt on you but with kindness, great kindness. It's a significant journey that changes the way you work and the way you think at work. For us, also.
Totally agree on the kindness part. You just said very and the patience.
Just a word about this terrifying process, which is a great advert, I know. People think, oh yes, I'll do the 5-step method. It's terrifying. What we do, for those who don't know the accreditation process, is we ask a practitioner to do each step of the 5-step method and to record it, either audio or video. We insist on at least audio, but maybe video. Or they can video if they're doing it on Zoom and then get a transcript from it. It doesn't, all of those are possible. But then we ask the person to, we have the thing I mentioned earlier in the round table, we have a competency framework. So we know that there are certain things that we want people to do in each step and overall. And we ask people to assess their own practice. So they have to listen to themselves in their own practice and decide whether or not they are meeting the different competencies in the competency framework. And then if they feel that they're good enough, that they have met those competency frameworks, they then can submit the same recording to an accredited assessor who will look and see whether they agree. That accredited assessor will do an independent assessment and will make a judgment as to whether or not they have met the competency framework. What is terrifying, therefore, is two things. The first thing is that the vast majority of practitioners have either never, or certainly not for a very long time, listened to themselves working. It's quite rare for people to, as a matter of course, take their sessions and listen to them afterwards. So people have a belief about what they think they do in sessions, but obviously we all know that what people remember about something versus any objective reality are very, very different things. So people's reconstruction of what happened in a session and what they said and what somebody else said often doesn't bear 100% relationship to what a recording tells you actually happened in the session. So it's really very scary for people to listen to themselves. And then, and this is particularly the case for people who are experienced clinicians, people who've been working for 10, 15, 20 years or more with their clients or their patients, to have somebody else listen to that work and make a judgment, and we don't try and make it sound as if it's judgmental, of course, but nevertheless the reality is, someone is saying, this is my work, do you think it's good enough? And somebody else in one way or another has to say, I have listened to your work, and yes it is, or unfortunately not quite, and maybe you need to change a few things. Now that's very scary for lots of people as well. So the process, and the reason why people are saying, if you do it, you learn a huge amount, well, it's because it's true. The very best way of understanding how to improve your practice is actually to look in detail at what you do and think what was good about that and what was not so good about it, which is one of the fundamentals of the five-step method. What are the advantages and what are the disadvantages? So that idea of balance is something that's built into the accreditation system. But it is it's challenging for lots of people, as well as it being time-consuming. So if you have done an hour's session, one step, and there are 5 of them, so we're talking about 5 hours in all, and for each one you have to listen to that hour, and then it takes a bit longer because you've also got to be rating it while you're listening to it, and you've got to be noting down what the evidence is to show that you met the competence. So for all of these things, it's quite time-consuming. It might take somebody an hour and a half, or maybe even 2 hours, to rate a 1 hour step, and they've got 5 of those. So then you might be talking about between 5 to 10 hours worth of work that a practitioner needs to do, over and above seeing the clients in the first place. And they're working in really busy services, and they don't even have time to, it's difficult to make time even to write the notes up. So under all those circumstances, you can see why accreditation is challenging for practitioners, and it's challenging for organisations to say, yes, we're running a busy service, and yes, we're going to give you all this extra time so that you can actually monitor your own work. So there are challenges with our gold standard. Okay, another question then. How has the 5-step method changed either your practice or that of your organisation? And was this a good thing? So how have things changed as a result, either for your own practice or the organisation? And have those changes been good or bad?
I suppose we're in a different situation because we're not a specific organisation that works directly with affected family members, but we can talk more nationally, and how it's changed nationally is that it's supported affected family members to be recognised as service users in their own right, that they have their own needs, and therefore, if you want to treat affected family members as service users, you need to learn how to deliver an intervention that's going to work. So that's where it's actually made a change in the country. It's also made services look deeper at, or funders look deeper at what services are providing and where we're using public funding. So now in certain kind of health areas and commissioning areas, we're only commissioning specific evidence-based interventions like parenting under pressure. 5-step is one of them as well. So it's raising the standard for affected family members to the same level as people who are getting treatment for a dependency or substance use disorder. So that's how it's changed. And it sounds very grandiose to say how it's changed the country, but that's the kind of impact it's actually had. It's escalated really high up. So
I think using and implementing and embedding the 5-step intervention into a large third sector organisation has actually created a lot of change. I think when you're in it, you don't really think about it. It's quite interesting just to reflect on it. And I think what it does is it kind of permeates the idea that working with family members is both valuable and necessary. because we have these family workers within services. And that means that other people that are working in the service then become aware that there's family members out there, and and I think we've also done things like, routinely when we are doing an engagement session with somebody who's using substances, we will routinely ask, is there anybody else around you that may benefit from support in their own right? And I think even practitioners saying that question time and time again when they're doing these assessments or engagement sessions is a way of getting it into their consciousness. I think the other way it's changed things is we have a lot of peer mentors in our services who are people with lived experience who contribute to services in different ways. And that's kind of one of the big values, I guess, in Turning Point, is working with lots of people with lived experience. We've now got lots more family peer mentors. We've got family members who go through a course to be a family peer mentor, so it's things like learning about boundaries and confidentiality and working with people, who are then invited onto the 5-step training. And I think it's really enriched our services to have both paid family workers offering 5-step and family peer mentors, speaking from a lived experience perspective. So I think actually there's been quite fundamental changes, and also from management and from the people who make the decisions about funding, in the sense that when we, as I said earlier on, when we go into a new service, it's a given that there will be at least one family worker. That wasn't the case 6 years ago. It would be a fight every time to get family worker into the staffing structure. So, now the question isn't shall we have a family worker, it's how many can we afford.
Did you feel it changed your practice as a practitioner?
I think it's changed my practice as a practitioner in the sense that it's convinced me that having a structured intervention that people can be trained in and can be supervised in doesn't necessarily have to come from people who are trained therapists. And that's been, I think for me, it's something that I've always known, but I think actually doing it on a regular basis, and we do a lot of 5-step training with lots of different people coming from different backgrounds, I think it's changed my idea about what's therapeutic and who's the practitioner in order to be therapeutic,
I think the main thing that changed in Jelinek, or maybe even in Holland, is that we really adopted the vision of the Tina Total, which you said earlier today, is something that I bring up all the time because it's really a new way of looking at the problems affected family members face. So I think it's much more hopeful than the way we approached affected family members a few years ago, in which I think we tried to help them help the other one to get themselves somehow. But now we let that go. So it's not really a purpose of the one with the substance use disorder to get into help. The main purpose is to really help the affected family member for themselves in their own right. I think that's the biggest change. We really look at them differently now. They are no longer a tool to fill our the other department, which is doing the treatment for the substance use disorder. They are in their own right, and we are trying to help them because they deserve it just as much as the husband, dad, child with substance use disorder. So, yeah, that's the main change, I think.
And has it changed your practice?
It changed my practice in the sense that I've become more passionate about really seeing the affected family member and really helping them to be stronger, have less stress, instead of speaking to them in order to make a move to solve the problem of someone else, actually. So it's really much more focused on the person
in front of you, I think. Yeah. When I think about a question, I think back to 5 years ago starting an organisation, and I think with the 5-step program, it's allowed us to increase the alcohol and other drug workforce because we've been able to train our own practitioners. So I think it has expanded. It's definitely enabled us to expand the service quite rapidly. And I think that's quite important. Another thing I'm reflecting on is that it's allowed us to be able to work with a range of people who would not normally seek services as an impacted family member. And what we know from our own research is that this can make a huge difference for the focal person. And so I think in that way it's changed practice. Certainly we're able to reach a much wider range of people. As for my own practice, I'm a psychologist, a counselling psychologist, an educational psychologist. Rather than changing my practice, it's enabled me to see that you can deliver a 5 to 6 session program that's as effective, if not more effective, than some programs that go on for a very long time. So I think it's probably very cost effective for an organisation as well. Yes.
The positive part is that with the training, the work with family members has changed for the better. And we also have different stimuli to propose to our colleagues of public service based on evidence and on a scientifically founded method. We understand that FNS more. We manage to get them on a path of awareness and research too. And these things of being part of a scientific context is important for us. So we are little and poor. It's a great opportunity. This belonging to such a competent, sensitive, evidence-based group really for us.
Okay, I have a couple of other questions, but I'm not going to ask them for the moment, so I'd like to open it up to the rest of the audience. This has been very much me asking the panel questions, and it may be, I hope it is, that people in the audience will also have questions. So, has anybody got a question for the panel? Let me run over with the microphone.
Thanks. I'm Kirsten. I'm a researcher from Denmark, and I'm trying to get funding for implementing 5-step method in a Danish setting. In the first part, I will try to get money for implementing it in Denmark. The substance use treatment is in the municipalities. I think it has a lot of perspective for implementing it also in the family services, but that will be the first step, and maybe in the future we'll expand it further. But so I was thinking, I think it was in the English setting you talked about that it is difficult to manage the intervention while you have other tasks as a professional. And in my project, it would be practitioners who are also working in the substance use treatment. So what do you think about that combination, that they had to have the 5-step method while they also work with the substance use treatment?
Thank you. I think it is a challenge. I think it can be done. So certainly when we first started introducing family work posts, we didn't have sufficient funding to create a full-time post only for family work. So when we started, we started having posts that were both recovery workers working with people with substance use and family work. It can be done, I think it just has to be really clear in terms of even down to the detail of days, because the substance use work will always overtake in terms of risk and, immediacy. So I think it can work, but I think you need to be really clear about not only how much time, but even, this is a very behavioural thing, but, even sitting in a different office or, there's something about separating your family work from your substance use work. The other issue that comes up very frequently is whether recovery workers who are working with somebody using could also work with a family member of that person. We don't tend to have any hard and fast rules about that. People find it quite difficult, so that's also it's just something to think about. Is it easier for somebody to work with somebody else's family member? But I think it can work. I think it's just about, putting those behavioural separations in place is crucial, or else I think it's very difficult to make it work.
I just add to what Jan has said. I think supervision is really critical in this situation so that people have excellent supervision around their work with impacted family members, which is quite separate from the supervision around the person. So I just add that.
I did train some people who do both, and they say it's very integratable, especially when you separate, like Jen just said, and they do affected family members in groups, so they already have time and planning, and so that really helps. I think it's a different approach also. So we do the addiction care one-on-one and the 5-step in groups, so it feels like really another task as well. So you can try to divide it more. Yeah.
Another question?
I have lots of questions,
Lots
but
of
I think
Well,
I'll write you.
you can ask them your second question now, and other people can be thinking if they want to ask a question. So
Yeah.
I'll be asking after this one. People have put their hands up again, so get ready.
Okay, sorry. So maybe it's a little bit directed to you, Wendy, because so it would be probably practitioners who are not used to have this family oriented competences. So there would be social workers who have been working with adults for a long time and not very used to have this family oriented style. So that's also a challenge, I think. But was it the same in the Netherlands? Or?
Sorry.
We already did work with affected family members, but we freestyled a bit, and we did do some informational evenings. We did a free chat group with lots of peer support. So we did a few things, but nothing really this structured. It has been a challenge, but it also has been so useful. So don't get discouraged. It's really something else, but it's for me. It really helped me get more professional, and really, it's really a nice way to focus even more. I think, yeah.
It would be challenging, but go on. Really go on, it's very important.
Just to add to that, at Family Drug Support we have quite a few people who are registered social workers who actually come in to do the 5-step training. They absolutely love it. They love the accreditation. They're good on risk management. They're good on crisis plans, which are part of it. But actually, they have to change a lot of their practice because they're used to looking at it through a different lens. But if the training is really good and if the accreditation is done well, it's possible.
Thanks. Just to add to that, I think from our experience of training, sometimes it's the challenge, as you were saying, Pauline, of training people who are professionally trained, is that they kind of tend to fall into the expert trap a little bit more from an MI perspective. So, and also I think if you're working in a social work role and also as a family worker, that's even more of a risk, isn't it? In terms of, and on a Tuesday you may be, giving information about safeguarding or dealing with safeguarding issue, and on a Wednesday you're working in a 5-step. So I wonder whether, I've thought about this before about our training, whether a bit of attitudinal exploration might be helpful before the 5-step training, in terms of, because I would imagine, I'm not a social worker, but I would imagine, being faced with children affected by substance use could really affect how you feel about how people should cope. So I wonder whether that attitudinal exploration might be helpful initially, even before getting into the 5-step training.
Do I have any other questions? No.
But if anyone has any,
Well, you put your hand up first. There's time for other people afterwards.
So this is the magic wand question, I think, and there's 2 bits to it. So firstly, your perspective as a practitioner or chief executive or for the organisational side of things, I guess what's the one thing that you'd like to do, in the future to take the 5-step programme further? And then what's the one thing that maybe we as a development team could do to support that? So it could be the same thing, or there could be 2 separate things. One you maybe like to do from the organisational side, but there may be something that you want from us.
Okay, nice question. If you had a magic wand and you could magically change one thing, what would it be? And if we could magically help you, what would that one magical thing we could do be?
We all have big dreams, so what our big dream is to have a governance framework for kind of like a network within Ireland of 5-step practitioners that have kind of annual submission of competencies and evidence of practice, and have a network where we can get together and discuss practice issues, or have kind of like a mini conference. That's kind of what's in our pipeline for down the road, because we've got everything set up to do that, and it seems like a wasted opportunity not to do it. And what we are also wanting to do is that we've recently trained 2 people, or had 2 people come on to like an information session about 5-step, who are setting up specific services for people from the Polish community, for family support services for people from the Polish community. So working really closely with them to turn it into different languages, and to turn a lot of the self-help handbook into an online app type thing that you can kind of, once you've been with your service, you get a login detail, a bit like there was a big blue wall or something a few years ago that did something similar, but hopefully a little bit better, but like that you would kind of get in and you would be able to work through it, and it would be there with you all the time, and that would hopefully then be aiming at younger people, because younger people are dealing with it, they're just not coming forward. So it's around them, that's kind of where we would like to take it.
This is quite grandiose.
She has a very good magic wand.
I think the only way that the services in England are going to move forward in working with family members is to be expected to do so by commissioners, and to have to report on how many family members we've seen, what we have done with them, what the outcomes were. Up to that point, it's an issue of goodwill sometimes, and particular individuals who move on and all that stuff. So sustainability is my worry in terms of, if we are not called to account, then how can we ensure that this is going to continue? Family support in any guise, whether it's 5-step or not. And I think from the AFNET perspective, what I've really learned from the last couple of days has been that kind of political campaigning aspect. So what can we do together to convince national systems, so that the Health Research Board from Ireland, the data, that's been really interesting in terms of how can we influence national systems to make it you know, I know it isn't yet in Ireland, but mandatory to call us to account as treatment services in terms of offering evidence-based interventions for family members. So it's great news.
You two are setting the standards high. Lots of great things have been said, but I think my main challenge and goal and dream would be to train much more. We did Jelinek, which is quite a big one in Holland, and we did little institutions in the south, and I want to do the whole country, Belgium after that, Denmark after that. I want every affected family member to have the best possible care. So, and besides that, I'd love to have an app or an online platform that's really reaching out to all those people that can't find us or don't have the guts to take the step to reach out. So, I'd love to do something to help those people that we don't yet find.
That's raised the bar even higher.
Is there anything that we at Connect can do, you have a dream of what we could do to help that? Or not? Don't have to.
I'm not sure. Maybe the online platform that we can then translate. Then you'll get our e-learning and then have a nice e-learning.
We'll never get your e-learning.
Having been aware 5 years ago about the lack of services for impacted family members, having set up family drug support and getting that well underway, the next vision is around adapting the 5-step program for youth. I'm absolutely committed that to improving the services that are available, which is just about very little, for young adults, maybe 16 to 24, who are impacted by their family or siblings, alcohol or other drug misuse. And I think that the 5-step will be a really good platform to develop resources and things that are going to be able to do that. And I'm hoping that we will be able to do that via telehealth, because young people are very literate in IT. So that's my dream. If you've got the magic wand, Lorna, I'm happy for you to wave it.
Well, as you know, just to say, we do have a bit of a magic wand in that it gets called Steps to Cope, as you know.
Yeah.
We met with Ed a couple of weeks ago to
Yes,
discuss that. So I know you're looking to do something a little different with
Yes,
Steps to Cope,
and
and
I
we do
think
already have an adapted version.
Yes, and I think the really good thing is that when you come to a conference like this, you meet people who you think, oh, well, I'd like to communicate with that person and get some more ideas. So I think infinite for that, because I think that's a really strong point about the organisation.
About young people, also, gambling families are, for young people, devastating. So I sign for your dream, and my miraculous question is very simple. Family members show up and ask for help, and in every kind of service is normal to think about helping families and not one person. Very simple, huh?
Well, I'll answer as well. I think I've got two things I would like my magic wand to do. One of them has been mentioned already, which is in a sense, the legislative changes. I would like to see family, some way of helping affected family members built into our legislation in England, as it has been in Scotland, even though there are implementation issues, as it has been, or seems to be, in Ireland and so on. I would like to see it built into the national data delivery services, as has happened in Ireland, where it's optional, but there is an expectation that people will submit information about how many family members their organisations are seeing. So I think that sort of top level, which is what Jan was talking about, absolutely. The second thing is, I was fortunate enough to work, when I was working in the mental health services and running various parts of the mental health services, I was running a service to do with family work and psychosis. And we had an intervention and one person who was particularly brilliant at developing this intervention for family work and psychosis. And I managed to get a small amount of funding to set up a service, and our dream was that we covered an area in the UK called Avon, which had about 1 million people, and our dream was that every single family member of someone with psychosis who needed or wanted to access our service would be able to get a service. And over a 5 or 6 year period, we managed to actualise that dream. We got to a state where every single person who needed the service would get the service. It was all based around this one person, and when she moved off, gradually we thought about sustainability, we had people and so on, but she was the champion, the absolute champion, and when she was the champion and moved off to do other things, gradually the whole thing dissipated. So I do have a dream that every person in Holland, every person in England, in Ireland, in New Zealand, in Italy, who is a family member of someone with an alcohol or drug or gambling problem, who needs help, can get that help. But it needs champions to do that. And they've got to be sustainable champions in some way. Okay, other questions? Oh, sorry. Yes, oh, there's a breeze.
Given that 5 steps is quite a structured program, is there room for deviation when a family discloses family violence? In Australia, the minute we recognise coercive control of family violence, we are mandated to do a family violence assessment, a merit assessment. And I just wondered how you deal with that in a 5-step structured program.
Thank you.
Maybe it is a panacea. No, the way we would deal with that is that risk is assessed in every single step. So we ask specifically about risk. There's no time, and we were talking about this earlier, you're constantly assessing it all the way through, you're listening for things, so you don't ignore it. And different places that we've delivered training, so we did a training in Scotland, and it brought up a lot of what if the family member is the one perpetrating the aggression and violence towards their focal person. And they said we've had that a lot. And so it's around then using your skills and your ability to say, we're going to spend this session dealing with this, and you're not in trouble. You know, we're not judging you, we understand your situation, but it's not acceptable, because we don't want people to feel as if they can't disclose something that's going on because we're going to reprimand them or we're going to judge them. But we set it out very clear at the beginning of every single session, the limitations of the confidentiality. We know that the world that they're living in is complex, to the point where there's a lot of drug-related intimidation. People might be finding themselves in situations where they're out of their control, being put in situations where they're engaging in criminal activities. So there might be drugs stored in their house because their relative has had to do that as part of an intimidation thing. And so we're just very upfront about where the limitations are. I will ask you about your risk every single session, so then by the end of the 5-step, they're getting to the 5th session, they'll know, I want help with this. If I know they're going to ask me every time, I might feel more confident by step 5 to actually raise this and say, this is what I'm going through. So we have to have that always there in our mind. So it's part of the intervention. So there is flexibility in it, and you can do that risk assessment at any point, but we suggest to do it at the beginning, so that if you then are hearing a risk, you don't find yourself thinking, I've got 15 minutes before the next person comes and I've got all this stuff to deal with. You know, you abandon your step and you deal with that.
Just to add to that, I think that's one of the advantages, I think, of offering 5-step within a drug and alcohol service, because we are so set up to deal with those risks with people who are using substances. So on the training for 5-step, we always say to family workers and family peer mentors, this person, the affected family member, is a client of this service. We would react in exactly the same way as we would react if we were faced with somebody who is using substances. We have safeguarding leads, we have safeguarding procedures, we have connections with local domestic abuse, organisations. So I think it's getting across to people that are doing or offering the 5-step that affected family member is a client of the service, and actually we've got lots of structures to be able to offer support in those areas. And yes, absolutely, we pause the 5-step intervention as long as we need to do for that reason.
Anybody else want to know? Yes? Oh, I think.
It was one of the things we were obliged to change because we have to ask it every single session. No, you have no choice if you are an accredited practitioner. You have to do it, and it's really, as Fiona said, very useful to do it every time because they become more. They have more courage to speak about doubts or things or something. They know that you do it, you raise the question, and in the time they change ideas. If at the beginning they say no, but sometimes and so on.
Do we have any more questions? Okay, I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll draw to a close. Have you been tempted at all to make any changes to the 5-step method? Do you think that there are changes which would be good to make?
Was brought up in one of the workshops yesterday about including information on the family member questionnaire. Some of the wording or the language is a little bit heavy, and that's where we don't use the word quarrel that often. So it's around getting people to reassuring them, just give them the question, and it's their own interpretation of what it means. It doesn't really matter as long as they have the same interpretation both times. You're measuring the same thing, but don't kind of be tempted to give them an explanation and lead them down the wrong path. So it's more around having that, but we all understand the reasons why it's not, but that's more the temptation to make the adaptation. And my temptation would be to offer it for other dependencies. Gaming, video, all sorts of kind of the issues that young people are dealing with is more kind of, that would be my temptation.
I was interested in the discussion that we were having earlier on about the need for lots of different types of services or provision for family members, including the crisis response and longer-term planned interventions, and the idea that was brought up earlier about having crisis planning built into 5-step intervention, I think would be really helpful. So yeah.
I think the only thing we really changed was visuals. So we hired a designing company who made the FAQ look pretty, who made the handbooks look pretty, and we kept everything as 5-step method as possible. So we didn't change anything, I think. No.
You're not suggesting that our handbook currently is very critical.
Following on from that, Richard, we do provide the handbook for every program, but we also put in a lot of extra resources in the handbook and lots of extra resources based on the substance being used by the focal person. We courier that to family members before the program starts. So that is these additional resources maybe around chronic sorrow, around concealed stigma, around the importance of language, all that sort of thing. Family members have found that very helpful, so that's an addition. The other addition is whilst we do all our data collection, at 3 months, our survey, online survey that we do, is to see about the impact of the 5-step rather than the changes that may be made in the 5-step. And I'm pleased that we've done that because it's an online survey that allows us to see what impact we're having on affected family members.
We use the 5 steps in an economical way, but we often propose other questionnaire after or to all family members who hasn't had the FMQ, because we saw them before when we had only the handbook for family members. Nowadays we often propose to call other family members to help the family member that has done the 5 steps. So we have seen brothers, sisters, cousins, also by Zoom. We try to help these family members speaking with other people of their family, and it's quite interesting. And addendum that we are experimenting is for people who has done completed the 5 steps method, but has still great problems for various reasons. We are using mediation of conflicts for the family member and the addicted or problematic person, with 2 people, one for the family member and one of the service or what it's needed to. We try to work like mediators of conflicts, and it's really challenging and interesting thing.
How is that going?
Very good. We have done few things. One family is a gambler who has also Parkinson's disease, so it's impossible for him to quit gambling because it's a consequences of the drugs that he has to take, and the wife is really very at the fruit, and the mediation of their conflict is so amazing that a social worker, after an hour with them in a room, without shouting, without nothing, told me, "But what happened? What did you do?" I think a new drug for his problems, but also perhaps what we are doing about conflicts. And then another family with very hard conflicts. The patient, the gambler, said at the end no, so we didn't do anything. Then the father and the mother continued to cry and look for help. So we began without the son, and then we are hoping that the son and the therapist come in the room last week. Well, we will see.
It's just one thing, just by some of the points that were made. It's not a change to the 5-step, but what we have done is if people have an impacted family member has committed and completed the 5-step program, if there are things that have been identified during that time, for example, anxiety or depression, that they want some extra problem, we provide 3 subsidised sessions after the program, because we know that they actually have a really good understanding of having done the 5-step program. And now, when we're meeting with a 5-step accredited practitioner who is also a registered counsellor or psychologist to work on those issues, we've just started that, so that's an addition rather than a change.
Okay, so thank you to the audience. We have been looking at implementation challenges and successes in different countries of the 5-step method, and we've been hearing from Ireland, England, the Netherlands, New Zealand and Italy, and I would just like to thank all of you and all of this wonderful panel for being in the limelight for the last hour and a quarter. So thank you very much indeed.